Production of Ruckus is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, the Hartwig family, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Ruckus, our weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. I'm Mike Shannon. The Ruckettes join me shortly. And our topics this week: the Kansas budget faces another shortfall, possible windfall for 18th and Vine, and the fallout from the latest presidential primaries, plus roast and toast. But we start with our interview segment and focus on a new event celebrating the anniversary of President Harry Truman's birthday. On May the 8th, the Truman Library in Independence will host Harry and Walter, Missouri's native sons, presented by Missouri Western State University, site of the Walter Cronkite Memorial in St. Joseph. To tell us about the event, the president of Missouri Western, who also happens to be the writer of Harry and Walter, Dr. Robert Vartabedian. Doctor, welcome to Kansas City. Thanks for coming down to do the interview with us.
Thank you very much, Mike. Great to be here.
It's a fascinating idea. How did it come about?
Well, we have the memorial and have had for several years to Walter Cronkite. It's a full throttle museum these days, and we wanted to have a live show associated with it as a capstone experience. And so we had a live show about 25 minutes long featuring Walter Cronkite, a live multimedia show. And then it was so well received, in fact, was even nominated for a Pulitzer Prize in drama, that we decided to do what turned out to be a prequel and get the two perhaps most well-known native sons of Missouri, Walter Cronkite and Harry Truman, on stage. And so that was the beginnings of it.
And you found the actors in the greater Kansas City, St. Joseph area?
We were very lucky. Two terrific equity actors. Jim Karinke plays Cronkite again, and Kenny Remmert plays Harry Truman.
And does Cronkite interview Truman during the program?
That's part of it. Actually,
Okay.
It starts out that way with the first telecast from the White House in 1952 with Cronkite interviewing Harry Truman. Actually, footage. We have live footage of the real thing. And then we bring the actors on stage with a big backdrop of projections as they speak, chronicling various aspects of their life and the interesting parallels in their both personal and professional lives.
I suppose I should mention, in case someone doesn't realize, the reason the Walter Cronkite Memorial is in St. Joseph is because Cronkite was born in St. Joseph.
Absolutely.
He didn't live there very long, though, did he?
Just for about a year, exactly 100 years ago, 1916, almost exactly 100 years ago, November 4th, 1916, he was born in St. Joe. And so this year we're celebrating the centennial of his birth with various events, this being one of them, at the time of the Truman Library celebration of the birthday of Harry Truman.
Aside from both being born in Missouri, do you see some other similarities between Truman and Cronkite?
Well, that actually helped shape the show. We decided just about the only person we could pair Cronkite with that was of that kind of stature would be a president of the United States. And we began doing research, and it became pretty remarkable, the parallels in their lives, probably the biggest being both being Missourians, but also known for their integrity, their support of civil rights, their long-standing marriages, their coming to prominence during World War II, the fact that neither one graduated from college. The list goes on, and that's the basic structure of the show, is going back and forth, showing those parallels on each side of the stage.
Do you think it's fair to say that both were, for a time, underestimated by their peers and others?
You know, that's certainly
Truman.
Certainly would be the case with Truman. I think people were surprised and, in fact, a bit worried after the untimely death of FDR in 1945. And I think actually since leaving office, people have come to realize what a great man and what a great leader Truman was. At the time, I think he had some shaky times. In the case of Cronkite, at least in my opinion, I think people realized fairly early in his career that this was someone to be reckoned with, going all the way back to World War II when he was
I thought maybe he was in Ed Murrow's shadow for a while in the so-called Murrow Boys at CBS.
Well, could have been. Of course, most of the Murrow boys, including Edward R. Murrow, were college educated, so there was a little tension there. But Murrow actually repeatedly tried to hire Cronkite and finally succeeded in 1950. So yeah, there would have been a little bit of competition there. But Murrow, of course, had been around a lot longer than Cronkite had, and then eventually Murrow in 1950 hired Cronkite for CBS.
Well, I will defer to you. You're a Walter Cronkite scholar, and don't you teach a course, or haven't you taught courses in Walter Cronkite?
Yeah, the last 2 falls, since it's been my life, in addition to being a university president for the last several years since we established the memorial. In the fall, I teach a class on the enduring legacy of Walter Cronkite. Done it a couple times now.
All right, the event is Truman's birthday, May the 8th, Truman Library, open to the public, slight admission charge of $1. If you're a mother, it's Mother's Day and you get in free as well, right?
Free for mothers, only $1 for everyone else as we celebrate Harry Truman's birthday and, of course, the centennial of Cronkite's birth with this show, chronicling the parallels in their life.
And everyone is welcome to visit the institution in St. Joseph and take a look at the Walter Cronkite Memorial.
Yeah, we have a totally free of charge museum, one-of-a-kind museum with probably more one-of-a-kind artifacts from Cronkite's life than any in the world.
And everything, I'm sure, is available online, information.
Right, you can find out more about it online. Absolutely.
All right, sir. Thank you very much.
Well,
pleasure to meet you. Thanks very much for coming in.
My pleasure. Thank you, Mike.
That is Dr. Robert Vartabedian discussing Harry and Walter, May the 8th at the Truman Library. Now we're going to meet the panel and start a ruckus, and that's the way it is. Impression of Walter Cronkite. Lisa Johnston is a columnist and political consultant. Steve Rose is a Johnson County civic leader and a Kansas City Star columnist. Mike Sanders is the former Jackson County executive, now in private legal practice with Humphrey, Farrington, and McLean. And Ron Freeman is the former Kansas GOP executive director, now a motivational speaker and writer. Welcome to all of you. Thanks for coming in. Mike Sanders, great to have you on the panel.
Great to be here.
Let's get started. There's an old song that goes like this. If it weren't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. If he were a singer, Kansas Governor Sam Brownback might make that his theme song.
Wow.
While it obviously involves more than luck, Brownback and Kansas legislators have learned of continuing budget projection problems. The current estimate is for a nearly $300 million shortage over the next 15 months. Brownback has outlined some options that no one seems to like, including virtually across-the-board cuts to state programs. Does he have some other options, Steve Rose?
Well, I don't think he has any other options. He's probably laid out everything that he thinks is a good idea. And as you have said, the legislature doesn't like any of them. So I think the real question is, and I'm kind of getting a gut feeling that what may be the outcome is that the legislature may just adjourn and let the governor make all the executive decisions, which he has the right to do, to make the cuts that he needs to make to balance the budget. The legislature, as you know, all are up for election, and as we all know, the governor's not up for election. So he could make a lot of the unpopular decisions that the legislature is afraid to make. I think it could happen.
What are some of the cuts that Brownback's talking about? What options is he looking at? The highway fund?
Well, he wants to take money from the highway fund again, and this time it would really impact a lot of projects. Before, they were just, they got by. This time would really impact it. He wants to be talking about securitization of the tobacco settlement, taking the money that Kansas would get for many years to come.
That's guaranteed income.
And get a one-time shot. And it's high, that the states that have done that, and there are actually quite a few, but when you read about them, they're not real happy that they did it because you're paying so much more over the course of time by losing that revenue. He's talking about deferring money, putting money into the retirement fund. No one seems to like that idea. And he's talked about across-the-board cuts, including schools. We could go on.
How can you have more cuts to schools when the Supreme Court is looking at school finance?
Well, that's a non-starter. Okay. I don't think anybody that I've talked to in the legislature
All right,
thinks that's going to happen.
All right, Ron Freeman, you were the executive director of the GOP. You're sort of a supporter of Sam Brownback and Kansas Republicans. What choices does he have now? What options?
Well, I think he's put 3 options on the table. It's not one or the other. it's a combination of factors. A lot of things on the table there, and I think it's a unique situation in that the state budget's affected by revenues as well as expenses. And right now, we're seeing expenses need to be challenged and questioned. When you look at the education, nobody wants to cut it, but sometimes you have to. And you look at where the revenues are, and if you make a sound decision, you can take care of what you need to take care of and move forward. You know, the Kansas economy has taken a huge hit in terms of agriculture, oil and gas has been way down. And so the economy is struggling, right? But it's not because of state policy as much as it is because of the economic things that are going on that the state can't control. So you look at this, and you know, one of the things about the retirement fund, Governor Brownback has averaged, I think, $387 million a year in that fund, which is twice as much as any other governor in the past. So he's doing some things that are trying to create and stimulate what's going on in the state and make it positive for everyone. But when you have a crisis, you got to manage through it.
All right, Lisa, declines in commodity cost and revenues. Is that the reason Kansas has financial problems?
I don't think so. I think that that's an excuse. And it's clear that the tax policy has been an abysmal failure. We haven't achieved the amount of revenue that we've needed for years now. And even some of the Republicans are starting to say that this small business exemption that gives small businesses a free ride is just not fair. And frankly, some of these folks are just individual practitioners. They're freelancers who happen to have an LLC. And so what you have is a situation where someone like that makes $100,000. They pay nothing. Someone else makes $100,000 who gets a paycheck, and they're paying over $4,000 in Kansas tax. So that needs to be addressed. But, you know, it's clear that there's this ideological stubbornness, and they need to get away from that. The grown-ups need to step forward and do something. But I will add a suggestion that if they wanted to take a page out of the libertarian book, they could look to our neighbors to the west and legalize marijuana. Colorado has had a lot of success with that and has gotten a lot of tax revenue.
Mike Sanders, you're the only person on the panel who's actually had to deal with income, tax problems, that sort of thing, balancing budgets. Do you see any way out for Kansas and Brownback?
Well, I think that what Sam Brownback's setting up is an even bigger problem in the future. So I'm going to say that what Sam Brownback's doing is what any fiscal conservative or anyone with a high degree of IQ about budget shouldn't do. He's employing the kick the can down the road strategy into 2017-18. There's nothing in what Sam Brownback has done which is going to address the systemic long-term imbalance. Spending exceeds revenues. You have to begin to deal with that. Everything that he's proposed, and all three of the proposals, are just short-term, one-time fixes. And so what he's doing is what I think Steve really talked about, is something that's politically expedient, and that is avoid a little bit of pain today for a much, much, much bigger problem tomorrow. And I think that's fairly irresponsible.
Lisa, are we going to see a big change in the state legislature after the fall elections?
That's a good question. I mean, I do think that
I brought it up.
I do think that voters need to look carefully at those who have supported the things that have been a failure, because quite frankly, it's been a shell game recently. And I'm all for cutting fat in budgets, but we're getting to a point where we're cutting down to the bone, and we are undermining things that we need to be investing in.
And quickly, Ron, got to wrap it up. Do you think we'll see a lot of Republican losses in the fall?
No, I don't, but revenues are up. I think when you look at the oil and gas and the economy grows, when it grows, you're going to have revenues. That's just a simple thing there. And so stay the course.
All right. Well, I'm sure it is just coincidental as PBS and KCPT reruns the legendary Ken Burns documentary series Jazz. City leaders are finalizing plans for a massive makeover of the 18th and Vine Jazz District. The plan includes money for the Jazz Museum, the Buck O'Neill Education Center, Friends of Alvin Ailey, and a variety of infrastructure improvements. Since the early 1990s, Kansas City taxpayers have invested $70+ million in the district, with marginal results at best. As someone who knows well that government spending programs aren't always popular with constituents, Mike Sanders, how do you think the typical taxpayer is going to feel about more money for the 18th and Vine Jazz District?
Well, I think you nailed it in your question. I think with 26 years of what we can consider incredible underperformance, I think with a very skeptical eye in terms of what that investment is. However, let me mount a brief defense of the Jazz District. I think it's a solid concept. I think it has enormous potential, potentially as a project. You look at Kansas City's rich history with jazz. You look at the fusion of really the blues and jazz movement and how that really started in so many ways in Kansas City. You look at the potential for that and what that means. The great Ken Burns documentary on jazz really highlights much of Kansas City's influence in that movement. You think of what that potentially means. You look at investment on Kansas City's east side, which desperately needs it. However, what the Jazz District has suffered from is not really a failed concept or failed idea. It's failed management over 26 years.
It's not a failure of too little money.
Absolutely not a failure of too little money. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And so what hasn't happened is you've had overly lucrative contracts, very little, if any, oversight, this belief and concept that if we don't make revenues, we can go back to the city government or the state government or the federal government and get this huge infusion of cash. And so it's not be run like a business. This is a great infusion. It's a great concept. It has enormous potential. But what's going to decide whether it's successful is whether that's
are any management changes being contemplated? Any structural changes being contemplated?
Well, that's to be determined. Now, you have a new manager that's there now. I think with this massive investment, what we need to see, and I think what the public needs to see, is beginning to run this more like a business and less like a government bureaucracy.
Steve Rose, in a community, as Mike pointed out, that is famous for being one of the birthplaces of jazz, why is it so hard to get large audiences to 18th and Vine to hear a jazz program?
Well, I'll give you the politically incorrect answer. People are afraid to go down there. And maybe that's not
people are afraid.
They're afraid to go to 18th and Vine.
They're going to be involved in crime.
And maybe that's unfounded. And however, there have been some instances down there which have made headlines, and people notice those things and get an impression. I'm sympathetic about the fact that money needs to be spent in your east side of the community. But when I think about $100 million going into 18th and Vine, I get a little bit queasy about it. That seems like an enormous amount of money to put into a project that really is never going to draw a lot of people. It just isn't. Everybody knows that. It was Emmanuel Cleaver's dream come true, and that's what we've got, and we're living with it.
And I think part of the challenge right now is that when you look at popularity of music, jazz is near or at the bottom along with classical. So there are some demographic challenges there. And I think they need to build some connections if they're going to make the area flourish. They need to have connections with partnerships with restaurants and tourism packages to get incentives to get people down there. And then possibly something like working with music programs in schools and bringing students down. I think that those kinds of connections could help it to begin to flourish more.
Well, there's no reason to go down there. There are no businesses there to speak of, unless you're going to the baseball museum or the jazz museum or the Blue Room. There's nothing there. But people talk about wanting to make 18th and Vine successful, Ron. What would success look like at 18th and Vine?
Well, I think if you just go about a half a mile to the west, to Crossroads.
Yeah.
The answer is there, and I think it's a boogeyman, so to speak, when you start talking about the danger of the neighborhood and so on and so forth. Because you look at New Orleans, who has crime problems. I had a friend of mine who's bigger than me, and we were in New Orleans. He was talking about how he was afraid about walking down the street because he might get snatched, and like, you got to be kidding me. But bottom line is that community needs a vision. And you look at Crossroads, you look at P&L, they've succeeded, they're growing, and let's do cross management, get some people involved to understand how to grow a business, and let's get it done.
They're talking about some sort of a streetscape, whatever that means, to connect the Crossroads area with 18th and Vine. Do you understand that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, in talking to Troy Schulte, one of the things they want to do is connect the Crossroads
City manager.
Absolutely. The city manager of Kansas City is they want to create a walkway where you can walk from the Crossroads district and really bring bodies to that area. And to go back to Steve's comment, in a former line of work, I used to track the numbers. 18th and Vine, I think it received some attention in terms of crime, but the reality is it's one of the safer areas we have in Kansas City. So I think those are largely unfounded for a variety of reasons. With that, what success look like? What you would like to see in 2 or 3 years is that they can largely pay their own bills. And I think it's possible. Just give me one quick story. In 2013, instructive for me when the Major League Baseball All-Star Game came to Kansas City. Seelig, the entire group came. What's the first place they wanted to visit? 18th and Vine. Instructive for me that it has enormous national potential.
I never thought you could tell a quick story.
I just did.
You did.
I kept it short.
This is great.
Good job, Mike.
All right, another week, another batch of primaries as the race for the Democratic and Republican presidential nominations continues. This past Tuesday, voters in 5 northeastern states cast ballots, and before the votes were counted, the conventional wisdom was that Hillary Clinton would once and for all make it virtually impossible for Bernie Sanders to win, and Republican Donald Trump would lengthen his lead over Ted Cruz and John Kasich. So, Lisa, were the forecasts not just conventional, but also wise?
Well, it seems to be correct, although in the case of the Democratic race, Bernie Sanders hasn't been mathematically eliminated. He has a very difficult path, but if something dramatic were to happen, he could still overtake Clinton.
Like Hillary being indicted for the emails?
Well, and that's an important topic,
Well, it
and,
is,
and
yeah.
one that I'm concerned that we're not going to get the information in all likelihood anytime soon. And in fact, the FBI director has indicated that they are in no way considering when the convention is occurring in terms of finishing the investigation or releasing information. And so we may not know the impact of that until after the Democratic
So
nominee
you
has
take
been
that,
selected.
that possibility seriously?
Oh, certainly
See,
I do.
other Democrats don't.
Well, and I think that that's unfortunate because, I mean, the fact remains that we don't know what the outcome is. And she did put a private server in her home. And she authored emails that contained classified information. And her talking point doesn't really hold water with me, that they were not marked classified at the time, because she authored it. She would have had to have marked it. So I think that this is going to be important to see how this comes to a conclusion. And at the very least, it's going to be a liability for her in the general.
Hillary won 4 out of the 5. Donald
Correct.
Trump won 5 out of the 5.
Yes, it was a sweep for him, and I think that he is well on his way to the nomination, despite what many folks in the party are saying, and despite what Cruz is trying to contend. He has a fairly easy path, a fairly accomplishable path at this point. He only needs roughly half the remaining delegates, and his poll numbers in the upcoming states are very strong. I think that he will be the nominee.
Steve, earlier this week, Ted Cruz came out and announced that Carly Fiorina would be his running mate. Is that a way to rescue the Cruz campaign?
I thought that was one of the worst decisions I think maybe I've ever heard of. I can't say enough about Carly Fiorina in terms of in a more negative term than I can possibly express. I think she is. I don't like Ted Cruz, but I think I like Ted Cruz better than I like Carly Fiorina. I don't know how he picked her out of the entire universe. Why he picked her, I have no idea. And of course,
She's an articulate woman, and he'll be running against
But
Hillary
she's got,
Clinton.
you know, even the polls that have shown that he ran before he picked her showed she might bump him up a couple points. I even doubt that. But, you know, okay, so he did what he did. But it looks desperate. And it's, you know, it's way too early to be naming a vice presidential nominee. Way too early.
I think the strategy is all about California, but
Yeah, she's
Trump's
right.
up
Yeah,
to
she
22
lives in California.
I know the
22
strategy,
points.
but
Mike
not gonna
Sanders,
work.
are you related to Bernie?
I am not. I am not related to Bernie, and God love a guy with the last name Sanders. I mean, kind of pivoting off what Steve said, I'm going to go a little bit of a different direction. I think when you talk about the Kasich-Cruz deal, when you talk about, you know, Reagan tried it in 1976 before the Republican convention. It failed miserably then. This feels like exactly what the voters are rebelling against, and that's strategic deal making within a party. And so I feel like that what the Cruz campaign attempted to do is strategically and tactically tone deaf as to what the mood of the nation is right now, and I think it's going to fail horribly.
Ron, you're what we call a movement conservative. You adhere to conservative principles and have for years. What do you think of Donald Trump as your nominee?
If he's a nominee, he's a nominee. I think it's going to be an interesting race because here's what you got to imagine in terms of the Democrat primary has been very interesting in that I think all along, I mean, I don't think there's ever a question that Hillary's going to win that race. I think that it was kind of facilitated in the media to kind of keep it balanced and look like Bernie had a chance when he really didn't. But you're going to have a race between Donald Trump, who, you know, is not really an ideologue. He's a Republican nominee, and then
He's a monologue.
Yeah, well, there's that too. He doesn't know what the KKK is. We'll talk about that later. But there's a lot there that he's going to be able to. You know, obviously he's tapped into the psyche that says, you know, we want that guy to get out there and do work for us. So it's going to be an interesting race.
Got to wrap it up and move on. It is time now for Roast and Toast, where the Rockettes congratulate or eviscerate people and events of the news. We start this time with Lisa Johnston.
My roast is for Judge Thomas Durkin, who issued a sentence of a mere 15 months in the Dennis Hastert case. He noted that he was a serial child molester and had paid off victims to try to avoid responsibility for his crimes, but that he had gone with a lighter sentence due to Hastert's age and his health status. I think that this betrays Hastert's victims and sends the wrong message. People should be held accountable for their actions regardless of age or health status. And in my view, the maximum possible sentence should have been issued in this case, given the unspeakable and heinous nature of the crimes.
Mike Sanders.
Well, my roast is for the entire Missouri legislature. It's another year and another failed attempt at ethics reform in Jefferson City. So if you're a fan of unlimited campaign contributions, gifts, tickets, trips around the United States, then you're a fan of what's occurring in the Missouri legislature. And beyond that, the inability to deal with the national scandal that swept through the state of Missouri in terms of the college-age intern sexual harassment scandal means, again, for the foreseeable future, Missouri will remain an ethics-free zone, and that should cause everyone that watches this show a great deal of pause.
Steve Rose.
I'd like to toast the Johnson County Election Commissioner, Ronnie Metzger. He ran into a situation out of his control. All schools which were polling places in Johnson County were eliminated for security reasons. So he had in the last, when we had the last presidential election, there were 225 polling places. They just lost 85. And I've heard a lot of people think it's going to be chaos and long lines. They have diligently, his office, gone out and one by one have reassigned new polling places, and it looks like they're going to get very close to where they were 4 years ago. I give them a lot of credit for that. That's a tremendous effort.
Rod.
Well, I'm going to toast Donald Trump because, man, he did what I didn't think it's possible. When you first stood up there, I said, no way, it's not going to happen. And you watch this, and a lot of people felt like, no way. And you even got away with saying you didn't know what the KKK was. That's sharp. It reminds me of a president who once said, it depends on what is. So I think it's going to be exciting in the fall as you and Mrs. Clinton have your debates. It's going to be very comparable to the White House during the early 90s. So anyway, thank you very much and congratulations.
All right, and finally, here is a surprising toast to the Social Security office in Kansas City, Kansas. Recently, I went there with my wife at her request while she reviewed her options. I expected delay, obfuscation, and confusion. Instead, the meeting was prompt, the explanations clear, and the options carefully outlined. The credit goes to a staff member named Teresa. On Ruckus, where we often legitimately criticize government and those who work in it, it is nice to offer a refreshing change of pace. And that is Ruckus for this time. We're back next Thursday at 7. Now for the Ruckettes and the crew, I'm Mike Shannon saying thanks very much for watching and good night.